The desert stretched wide and hollow, a basin of dust and silence where the wind hissed like some restless ghost. The sun, swollen and rust-red, sagged against the horizon, spilling light across the plains until the whole earth seemed aflame. A lone rider cut through it all, horse ribs showing through hide, rider's hat pulled low to shadow the eyes. He moved as it pursued, though the trail behind him was empty but for vultures circling with patience. The town that appeared at dusk was half dead, its wooden bones leaning and splintered. Broken shutters clattered on bent nails. A church bell, cracked in two, hung silent above a sagging steeple. The rider slowed, dismounted, and tied his horse outside the saloon. The beast lowered its head to drink from a trough where the water had gone green. Dust clung to the man's coat, his boots, his hair. He carried a revolver, blackened along the barrel, as though fire had once licked it and never let go. Inside, the saloon flickered with lamplight. A piano stood mute in one corner, keys yellowed like old teeth. A handful of men scattered across tables lifted their eyes when the stranger walked in. He moved with the weight of someone dragging chains no one else could see. The barkeep squinted, poured him whiskey without being asked, and muttered low enough that only those close could hear, "Son of a gun." The words carried more than recognition. They carried judgment, fear, memory. Men leaned away, as if the blood of another man's sins might splash them clean through. The stranger drank, the liquor harsh against his throat, and let the silence stretch. He did not give them his name, but names rose from the dark corners of the room all the same. They spoke of a father, a man who had turned towns to ash, who had left behind trails of widows and graves. They spoke it like a curse, spit between teeth. Some swore they saw the father in the son's face, the jawline, the shadowed eyes, the way he wore silence like a weapon. One man at a back table finally said it outright. "Your old man took lives for less than a look. You carry his steel. Means you carry his ghost." The stranger did not answer. His hand brushed the revolver at his side. The gun's surface was scarred with black streaks, almost alive in the lamp glow. He sometimes felt heat rising from it, as though embers slept in the chamber. Nights were worse. In his dreams, he heard a voice, low, rough, taunting, his father's voice. Sometimes it urged him to draw, to kill. Sometimes it whispered forgiveness would never come. The men around him grew restless. No one wanted him here, but no one dared be the first to push. It was enough that he drained his glass, sat back on the bar, and rose. Chairs scraped as men shifted to clear his path. He walked out into the cooling night, where stars pricked the dark sky like nails. His horse lifted its head, ears twitching. The town behind him exhaled a sigh of relief, with groaning as though the buildings themselves were glad to see him go. He mounted slow, scanning the shadows. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a figure leaning against the church steps, a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, smoke curling around him. The stranger blinked, and the steps were empty. He pressed his heels to the horse's flanks. Dust kicked up, trailing him down the road that bled into the endless prairie. Out beyond the last shacks of the town, the night settled heavy. Coyotes howled at the rim of the hills. The stranger rode on, but his mind was tangled in memory and dread. His father's shadow followed close, heavier than the desert night. He could still hear the whisper from the saloon, carried in the dry wind. "Son of a gun." The words clung to him, not as insult, but as prophecy. He felt it in his blood, coiled and waiting. He told himself he would not be his father's echo. He told himself a man could shape his own trail, cut free from the sins behind him. But when his hand brushed a revolver, heat bled through his skin, and a voice like gravel rose inside his head. "You'll never outrun me, boy." The stranger closed his eyes, jaw set tight. The prairie stretched ahead, vast and merciless, daring him forward. The trail bent through scrubland where mesquite trees clawed at the sky and shadows stretched long as knives. By dawn, the stranger's face was lined with sleeplessness, eyes sunken but sharp, as if he had not shaken the voice whispering through his dreams. His hand strayed too often toward the revolver at his side, fingers grazing the scorched steel like a man afraid it might vanish, or erupt without warning. He spotted dust rising behind him first, then the low thunder of hooves. He reined in atop a ridge, scanning the horizon until 3 riders emerged, silhouettes etched against the rising sun. They came fast, guns loose in their hands, dust curling around their horses like smoke from a fire. When they slowed, circling him at a distance, their grins showed crooked and mean. "You wearing your daddy's iron," the leader drawled, his voice slick as oil. "That makes you what he owed. Blood don't wash clean." The stranger said nothing, eyes on the man's hand, the twitch of his fingers against the grip of a revolver. The riders close in, spitting curses about towns left smoldering, brothers buried without prayers, debts measured in graves. The weight of their anger was a noose tightening around him, yet beneath it lay another weight. The familiar burn of the revolver at his hip, alive as though it hungered. When the first rider drew, the stranger moved. The world shrank to smoke and sound. The crack of shots, the whistle of bullets through dry air, the sharp reek of powder curling into his nose. Horses reared. Screams split the dawn. He moved with reflex rather than choice, and when the smoke thinned, 2 men lay in the dirt, blood blooming into the sand like black flowers. The third, wounded, crawled backwards, hatred still alive in his eyes even as breath rattled out of him. The stranger lowered the revolver slowly, hands trembling. He had not thought, had not chosen. It was as if the gun itself had leapt to life, pulling his hand with it. The dead lay staring at the rising sun, their mouths still open as though trying to speak what would never be heard. The smell of burnt metal clung to the stranger's fingers. He spat in the dirt, cursed under his breath, and left their bodies for the scavengers. By midday he reached a canyon carved narrow and deep, where stone walls glowed red under the heat. There he found a figure standing at the pass, tall and gaunt, robes dust-stained and torn, a wide brim hat shadowing a hollow face. The man carried no gun, only a crooked staff polished smooth by hand and time. His voice carried strange weight, slow and deliberate when he spoke. "Your father's sins ride close behind you, and closer still inside you." The stranger stiffened, hand tightening on the revolver. "I don't know you. You don't need to." The man's eyes glinted like coal beneath his hat brim. "Every son carries the bones of his father. Some bury them deep. Some rattle with every step. Yours rattle loud, boy. Loud enough to wake the dead." The stranger's mouth went dry. "You speak like a preacher." "Once," the man said, "once I carried gospel. Now I carry truth. And truth is this. The gun on your hip ain't yours. It's his. It breathes him. It eats at you each time you draw. Keep feeding it, and soon you'll wear his face, his sins, his shadow." The stranger swallowed hard, anger and fear twisting in his gut. He wanted to deny it, to spin the man's face and ride on, but the revolver seemed to pulse against his side, like a living thing. The memory of the ambush burned clear in his mind, the way he had killed without thought, as if someone else had commanded him. He turned his horse without another word, though the preacher's voice followed him, echoing against the canyon walls. "You can't ride from ghosts, son. They ride faster than any horse." That night, he made camp near a dry creek bed. The stars shone sharp and cold overhead. He fed a fire with brittle brush and sat staring into the flames. Sleep came in jagged fragments, dreams thick with smoke. He saw his father's face, jaw unshaven, eyes cruel, mouth split in a grin that showed no joy. He saw a fire sweeping through homes, the sound of children crying behind shuttered doors, the echo of laughter that was not his own. In the dream, he raised a revolver and pulled the trigger, and when the smoke cleared, it was his own reflection lying dead in the dirt. He woke gasping, sweat slick on his skin despite the cool night air. The fire had burned low. From the darkness just beyond its glow, he thought he saw a figure standing, a tall man, hat shadowing his face, smoke curling off him like breath. The stranger reached for his revolver, but the figure dissolved into the night wind. His heart thundered as he lowered the weapon. He sat there until dawn, fire gone to ash, knowing sleep would not come again. He told himself he would not let the curse of his father root deeper. Yet the path ahead stretched empty, offering no answers, only more silence and dust. The whisper lingered in his skull, as steady as heartbeat. blood don't wash clean. The land grew harsher as he pressed onward, miles unspooling beneath hooves, until the world narrowed to stone and silence. Days blurred into one another, heat by noon, chill by night. The endless horizon a reminder that there was nowhere left to run but forward. Each evening the revolver weighed heavier, its grip burning against his hip, as if eager for blood. He thought often of the gaunt preacher's words, circling them in his mind like a vulture over carrion. At last, the prairie fell away to a basin, and in its hollow lay a town that seemed carved from nightmare. Ash Hollow, the name surfaced in his memory before he ever saw the faded sign tilting at its outskirts. The place looked abandoned, but not forgotten. Boards sagged across windows, doors hung crooked on rusted hinges, and weeds split the main street. Yet there was a stillness too deep to be natural, a waiting quality, as though every crooked beam leaned in to watch him pass. He dismounted, boots crunching against gravel, the sound too loud in the airless quiet. He tied the horse to a post that leaned like a drunk, then walked the street with hand close to the revolver. His father's stories lived here, told in whispers that carried even to his childhood ears. A town burned, men shot down for amusement, women left to mourn with nothing but ashes. Standing amid its ruins now, the stranger felt the old tales gnaw at his chest. This was no forgotten town. This was a scar carved deep into the land, and into him. Inside a gutted saloon, chairs lay overturned, bottles smashed long ago. He stepped across the floorboards, which creaked like voices murmuring. In the cracked mirror behind the bar, he caught a glimpse of himself, and behind him, shadows like figures gathered, silent and watching. He spun, hand-drawing steel, but the room lay empty. Only dust moved in the shafts of light. He cursed under his breath, slid the gun back into its holster, and left the place to its ghosts. The deeper he wandered, the heavier the air grew. He passed a child's doll half buried in dirt, its porcelain face shattered. He passed a church blackened by fire, its steeple bent like a neck broken. As he stepped inside, his breath caught. The pews were charred husks, the altar cracked, yet the faint scent of smoke lingered, as if the fire still lived here. And along the walls, he saw them, shapes flickering at the edge of sight. Men, women, children, pale and hollow-eyed. They did not speak. They only watched. His chest tightened as he gripped the revolver. With a desperate motion, he raised it and fired at the nearest shadow. The gun roared, flames spitting from its mouth. The figure dissolved into smoke, curling away like mist at dawn. For a moment the church fell silent again, save for the ringing in his ears. But when the smoke cleared, the shadows still ringed him multiplied, their stares unbroken. He stumbled back into the daylight, heart hammering. The revolver burned against his palm, hot enough to sear, though he could not let it go. In that moment he felt it, life throbbing within the weapon, a pulse not his own. The truth struck him harder than any bullet. This iron was no tool, no mere heirloom. It was a vessel, his father's spirit coiled within it, feeding on every shot fired, every drop of blood spilled. From the far end of the street, the gaunt preacher stood once more, robes stirring in a wind that did not touch the stranger's skin. He did not walk, but seemed to drift closer, face half in shadow. His voice rolled like distant thunder. You see it now. The steel you carry is no gift. It is a chain. With each life you take, the spirit of the old devil tightens around you. He waits to wear your body as he once wore his own. The stranger's mouth was dry. Then what am I supposed to do? Throw it away? It follows me. It lives in me. The preacher's hollow eyes gleamed. There is no leaving what is bound. You must face him. You must reckon with the fire that bore you. Only then will you break free. The stranger wanted to curse, to demand answers, but the words died on his tongue. He looked down at the revolver, saw faint smoke coiling from its barrel, though he had not fired. For the first time he understood the weight he carried was not just his father's sins. It was his father himself, clawing from the grave, eager to ride again through his blood. The preacher's voice lowered to a whisper that carried like a knife. He waits in the heart of this hollow, boy. He's calling you even now. If you ride away, you ride with him inside you forever. If you stay, you may bury him or be buried. The stranger's hand shook as he holstered the revolver. Around him, The town groaned, with shifting, windows rattling, as though stirred by the preacher's words. A low wind picked up, carrying ash that stung his eyes. He stood in the center of Ash Hollow, caught between fear and fury, knowing there would be no peace without a reckoning. And somewhere in the wind, beneath the howl of dust and the groan of timber, he heard laughter. His father's laughter, rising from the ruins like smoke from smoldering fire. Midnight draped the town in a veil of silver, the ruins of Ash Hollow cast in long, skeletal shadows. The stranger stood at the center of the abandoned church, lantern light flickering across charred pews and broken glass. The revolver hung heavy at his side, heavier than iron should weigh, as though the bones of the dead had been melted into its chamber. Each breath he drew tasted of ash. His heartbeat echoed in the silence, steady, defiant, but trembling beneath its rhythm lay the whisper he could never silence, his father's voice. "You've carried me long enough, boy." The words rolled through the air, though no figure yet showed itself. The stranger's jaw tightened. He had waited for this moment, though dread had ridden at his heels the whole way. He had thought of turning back, of fleeing into the wilderness until the desert swallowed him whole. But the preacher's words clung like burrs. Face him or wear him forever. From the shadows beyond the altar, smoke thickened, curling into the shape of a man. Step by step, it gathered form, broad shoulders, a wide-brim hat, a grin carved cruel into a weathered face. His father stood as if he had never died, though his edges shimmered like flame. The air around him reeked of gunpowder and scorched earth. "You think you're better than me?" the apparition drawled. "I carved my name into this land with steel and fire. Every soul feared me. And you've been nothing but my shadow." The stranger steadied his hand on the revolver. "I came to end it." The ghost's laughter rattled the broken rafters. "End it? You're me, son. Every bullet you fired, every man you've laid in the dust, was my hand guiding yours. You'll never put me down." The lantern flame sputtered as though the words themselves consumed air. The stranger drew, and the ghost mirrored him. Time stretched thin, silent, sharp as a blade. Their eyes locked, mirrors of blood and legacy. The first shot cracked like thunder, shaking loose shards of glass that fell like black rain. The father's form shuddered but did not break. Smoke swallowed the wound, twisting into new shapes. He fired back, the bullet searing through the stranger's shoulder, heat blooming bright as fire. Still the sun did not fall. He staggered but held his ground, firing again and again, each shot splitting the night, each impact ripping pieces of shadow from the figure. Yet with every bullet, the revolver burned hotter, fusing with his hand, feeding on his fury. Pain seared him, and for a moment he saw his reflection in his father's eyes, the same grin, the same hunger. A voice rose in his skull, low and insidious. "Asterisk let me in. Boy, together we'll ride again. You'll never be weak. You'll never be alone. Asterisk." His knees buckled, breath ragged. He could end it by giving in, letting the spirit claim him, becoming the very man he feared. Or he could break the chain, even if it meant his own blood. With a cry that split the silence, he raised the revolver not at the ghost, but at himself. The gun roared, flame spilling, the shot carving into his side. For an instant the world went white. The ghost reeled back, howling, smoke unraveling into the rafters, clawing against its unmaking. The church walls shook, timber splintering, the sound like a storm tearing heaven open. The stranger dropped to one knee, revolver clattering from his hand. Its barrel cracked, metal split with a hiss as though something alive inside had finally died. Around him, the shadows dissolved, the watching figures vanishing into the wind. Only silence remained, broken by his labored breaths. He pushed himself upright, blood warm against his ribs, though he still stood. The apparition was gone, the laughter gone. The curse broke